Let's face it, no matter how I do this list, you guys are gonna just complain about it. Hey everybody, this is David, and today I'm going to be talking about my top 10 favorite films of all time. Now, some of these might not be, the all-time most well-made films, or some of them might not even be the most well-reviewed films of all time. Most of them are. But this is my list. I wanted to share my favorite films because of a recent trend on Twitter that was going recently on fave 7 films. So you list 7 of your favorite films, and I wanted to do a top 10. I thought, you know what? I passed 300 followers on YouTube, subscribers, and why not finally share my top 10 favorite films of all time. These are the 10 that I can choose and never get bored of. I love them, and I'm gonna tell you the truth though, this list wasn't easy to make because there were so many movies that I wanted to include here. I feel like I should have made a top 20. That's how much I wanted to include, but I thought, you know what, let's make this video short, not too long. I don't want to bore you guys, so let's get through this. My top 10 favorite films of all time. At number 10, I have the animated classic Aladdin. Voice, with Robin Williams as the voice. Such a great animated film, so much fun. Jafar is one of my all-time favorite Disney villains. And I just love the story of Aladdin. I think the characters are all great. This is such a great movie. And I think that's why it's made my top 10. At number 9, I have The Lion King. The Lion King is another great animated classic from Disney and voices a huge talent of actors such as Jeremy Irons as the voice of Scar, Matthew Broderick as the voice of adult Simba, Jonathan Taylor Thomas as young Simba, and so much more. And this is a toss-up for me between Aladdin and The Lion King. Sometimes I alternate. Sometimes I like Aladdin a little bit more. Sometimes I like The Lion King a little bit more. In more recent years, I think I have been leaning a little bit more to The Lion King because I do think the story of The Lion King is just so great and so universal. The characters are so much fun. Timon and Pumbaa, the songs. Disney movies from the 90s always had great songs, so that's why The Lion King is number 9 on my list. At number 8, I have Inception. This movie is from Christopher Nolan. It's definitely one of Nolan's best, I think, and most imaginative. I remember when this movie came out, the idea of going into dreams seemed like a really cool idea. Now, of course, it's been done sort of in the Nightmare on Elm Street series, or that's the one that pops into my head right now. But Inception was done in a really cool way. It was a heist movie in some ways. So with action there as well, and Leonardo DiCaprio, this is definitely during the time that, during the mid-2000s, Leonardo DiCaprio, for people like me, was starting to earn some respect because during the 90s, he was just a pretty boy that, all the girls gushed about. He was kind of like Justin Bieber in a lot of ways, where the girls loved him, the guys were like, meh. And then mid-2000s, he was gaining respect by doing movies like Shutter Island and The Departed, and now this movie. If Nolan sees talent in him, I see talent in him too. It was also the movie that introduced us to Tom Hardy, the first big blockbuster to really get his name out there, because before this, Tom Hardy wasn't really known, but this was the movie that finally brought him to our attention a lot more, probably because, once again, Christopher Nolan just knows how to cast people in the right roles. At number 7, I have Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. A lot of people are probably going to wonder, David, what about Return of the King? What about Fellowship of the Ring? Well, number 1, I'm picking one of each franchise, so I had to choose one of the Lord of the Rings movies, or else this list would be full of Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, and The Dark Knight. So what did I pick? I picked The Two Towers because I felt that The Two Towers is my favorite. It always has been my favorite Lord of the Rings movie. A lot of people usually go for Fellowship. A lot of people usually go for Return of the King. I think both of those are great films also, but The Two Towers is the one that features Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli the most, while the other two While I love them because, Return of the King features Gandalf a lot more, and Fellowship features all of them, I guess, a little bit more, especially the hobbits, Frodo and Sam. The reason I picked Two Towers is because I feel that there was a better flow in that movie. I felt almost every scene I was really enjoying. Well, with Fellowship, the beginning kind of took a slow start, especially if you watch the extended versions. It takes a little bit of time to set up the characters and to really get to the juicy stuff of that story. And then Return of the King has who knows how many endings. So that's why I went with Two Towers, because it's just an adventure movie, action movie, both all the way through. So that's why I put Two Towers here. At number 6, I put Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. This is probably one of the best finales of all time to any franchise. Harry Potter, there's a lot of Harry Potter movies that probably wouldn't make my top 10. Top 20? Maybe. I'd have to think about it a little bit more. But the last Harry Potter movie is definitely the one that the first movie was building up towards, and it was a very satisfying conclusion. We've seen these kids and the supporting actors grow throughout this franchise, the 7-movie franchise, or 8-movie, and it was just a fantastic conclusion. I couldn't think of any other way to top this. And if another Harry Potter movie ever comes out, I'll be looking forward to it. I'll be right in line, going to check it out. But you know what? Right now, I'll settle with Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, because that's the closest thing I'll be getting to go back into this world once more. At number 5, I have X-Men Days of Future Past. If it wasn't for this movie, none of the X-Men movies would probably be in my top 10. Maybe X-Men 2. I think that would be more in the top 20. But X-Men Days of Future Past to me is the greatest X-Men movie of all time. And I think it definitely services not only the first class story, it services the original trilogy as well. Closes the doors on that trilogy in a lot of ways, while opening new doors going forward. And that's what I thought this movie did really well. I don't have movies like Back to the Future on my top 10. It is on my top 20 for sure, the first Back to the Future movie. And I've always said this, when time travel is done right, it could be a lot of fun. And this movie, I felt, pulled out all the stops. It pulled out everything I wanted to see with a very satisfying ending to really make X-Men fans tear up. I think this is literally the only superhero film where I get a little teary-eyed at the end. It's a really great film. At number 4, no shock here, The Avengers, one of the most fun films of all time. I love this movie all the way through. It was something unique and special when coming to superhero films. No one has seen a superhero film like this, or a film in general like this, bringing characters from different films, putting them together and seeing them interact with each other. That was the fun of this film. And a great villain in Loki as well. This movie wouldn't have worked if it didn't have a great villain for these Avengers to go up against. And I think it really set up the MCU really well going forward. At number 3, I have Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. Probably the oldest film on my top 10. What can I say? I love Star Wars. And this was really a difficult one for me to choose because I really love Revenge of the Sith. But when I sit back and really think about it, Empire Strikes Back is hands down, I think most people can agree with this, the best Star Wars movie, and the one that I chose to represent the saga, the franchise. And it's definitely the darkest of the original trilogy. I'd say Revenge of the Sith was a little bit darker, but clearly that one has a little bit more problems to it. That Empire Strikes Back, I think, is pretty much the perfect Star Wars film that I think a lot of the other films, the ones that are even coming out still, like Rogue One and The Force Awakens and Episode 8, I think that's the one that all these other films have to try to beat. Right now, Empire Strikes Back has the bar set high. And we can't forget about that iconic moment in this movie. If you haven't seen Empire Strikes Back, go back, watch the original trilogy. watch episode 4 first, watch episode 5, and then 6, because there are some great revelations that the prequels might spoil for you. That's why people say watch the original first, then go back and watch the prequels after, especially if you get into it. The originals, they're the ones that are worth seeing for sure. Okay guys, so we're arriving to number 2 on my list right now. This is going to be the most, probably the one that I'll probably get a little bit of hate for, but I don't care. I gotta be honest. Guys, this is my list. If I'm not honest with myself, I'd just be lying to you all. And here I go. Ready? My number 2 choice. My second favorite movie of all time right now. Man of Steel. That's right. Zack Snyder's Man of Steel is my number 2 choice. I love this movie. I think it is one of the most underrated films of all time. And I love the character of Superman. I think this movie really updated Superman, kind of what the general audience was hoping for. I enjoyed Superman Returns as well. I wouldn't put it in my top 10 of all movies of all time anyways, but I would say that that tried to emulate what the original Superman films did with Christopher Reeve. Tried to give that style, bring it back to us. It was a really nostalgic film if you really look at it, and people didn't go for it. So what did? They made completely the opposite. Man of Steel, which was more action-packed, which was more darker, more serious, more grounded. And I thought it really works. I love the scenes on Krypton. Seeing Krypton not just as a simple snowy ice planet. This was the Krypton I wanted to see. More detail, more creatures. This was a planet that I wish we could have explored more of, but I'm glad we still got the time we got with it. The cast is amazing. Henry Cavill as Superman, Michael Shannon as Zod, Russell Crowe as Jor-El, and Amy Adams as Lois Lane. The list goes on with how great the acting caliber is in this film. There are so many scenes. One of the most epic battles at the end of this movie, in my opinion, is the Superman versus Zod fight at the end. I love it. And I totally recommend it for people who haven't seen Man of Steel. I think it is one of the greatest superhero movies. And obviously I think it's it's my second favorite movie of all time. So there you go, my recommendation on that. And if you didn't like Man of Steel, try watching it again maybe. Maybe you'll change your mind. I mean, right now it is the highest scored DC Universe movie on Rotten Tomatoes with a 53%. 53 might not be the best number, but it's better than 27 and 26 right now. And finally, my number 1 film of all time, The Dark Knight. Personally, I would have put the whole trilogy at number 1, but if I'm going to pick just one like I did with all the other franchises on my list, Dark Knight is totally the one that sets the bar high for me. This movie was amazing from beginning to end. Obviously, this movie is not underrated. This is a movie that's loved by a lot of comic book fans. Some people either pick the Avengers, some people pick the Dark Knight. Those are usually the top 2 on everybody's list. And for me, it's going to be hands down The Dark Knight. This is a movie with great characters, great actors playing those characters, a great story. I mean, Heath Ledger's performance as the Joker is by far one of the best performances by any actor in a superhero film. Christian Bale's Batman, I think, is pretty underrated because, a lot of people like to complain about his grisly Batman voice. For me, I don't mind it. I like it. I think it makes him sound intimidating. Some people think makes him sound a little silly. I disagree. Maybe I've gotten used to the voice a little bit faster than most people. And with that, guys, man, and this movie managed to get Two-Face right, too. So, I mean, compared to that Tommy Lee Jones version back in 1995's Batman Forever, I think this is a huge step in the right direction. And clearly the DC films tried, being inspired by Nolan's Batman trilogy with the dark, gritty, realistic take. Clearly it's not working. And why? Probably because Christopher Nolan is just a fantastic filmmaker, and he can make that work. Maybe it only works for Batman, and maybe that's why they have to start taking a little bit more of a fun approach, because hey guys, you have a guy who has all this power flying in the world, lighten up a bit. But with Batman, the realistic, gritty tone can work. So guys, that was my top 10 favorite films of all time. I know it's probably gonna cause a little bit of controversy, especially for my number 2 choice and why I put it above. But you know what, that's my list, and I don't want to lie to you guys. I don't want to change my list just to make people happy. I want to make my list to make me happy. And now you know, this is like the flavors, my favorite films, what I like, my top 10. These are movies that I have given 10 out of 10s to. It's this one and maybe like 2 or 3 more films that I left off the list that also have 10 out of 10, but I couldn't fit them on the list, obviously. So hopefully you comment, tell me what you think of my list. Give me your top 10 films of all time. I'm always looking forward to seeing what other people really enjoy. So share your thoughts in the comment section below. Check out me on Twitter, Facebook, and check out my podcast. And with all that being said, guys, take care.